On a new episode of Locked On Cavs, we're going to talk about Cavs Pistons, what stood out from that game, the importance of wins against bad teams, and we're going to dive into some stats you need to know. 4 Cavs stats you know for the stretch run. It's a solo one today. No Evan, but I'm here. Let's dive in.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, where first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, and the promo code is Locked On. All right, I'm Chris Manning from SB Nation for the Sword, Diamond UPROXX, Forbes. Evan's out with me today. He'll be back tomorrow after the Cavs play the Celtics. So if you want Evan, you can come back. You can come back for that. But today's show will just be a solo one. As mentioned at the top, we're going to talk about Cavs Pistons, and then we're going to dive into the stats you need to know. To start with the Saturday's game, a very easy Cavs win. This is just the kind of game that I think if you're Cleveland, you should just be like, yeah, we took advantage of it. We did what we needed to do. We got the win, and you move on. There's not a lot from a perspective of breaking down the game in an X's and O's standpoint, from a statistical standpoint, that we really can take away from it. The Pistons are in this spot where they don't have Cade. They're really bad. They're in the race for Wemby or Scoot or whomever they are going to get with a really high draft pick, right? Like, this is not a team that the Cavs are competing against for playoff seeding. You know, they play Boston Monday. They play Miami, this week. Those games have bigger stakes. The Knicks are on the horizon. The 76ers, for the last time this year, are on the horizon. Those are games with matters. And if you're at this point in the year and you're not in one of those games and you're in a game against a team that isn't good, you need to just take care of business against them. You need to just push your odds for the top 4, maybe pushing for third, and you need to win these games. There are more of these coming up that are against teams that are bad. There's a 2-game swing in Charlotte coming up after these 2 games in Miami, the little annual MAC tournament road trip for the Cavs when Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse becomes the site of the MAC tournament for the men's and women's team. Go Bobcats. Those are situations where you get teams like a Charlotte, doesn't have LaMelo Ball now for the year, that isn't good, that is tanking, that maybe is going to show up and play hard and has a coach in Steve Clifford who's a real pro, but they're not a good team. By any metric, by any film, by anything, that is not a good basketball team. You have to go in, you have to take advantage. There will be games with stakes. Boston, the 2 Miami games, the Philly game on the horizon, all that stuff. The Knicks game, I think, in particular, the one still left. But these games against teams like the Pistons, you have to win. The Cavs did that on Saturday. That is the most important thing. They win pretty comfortably. Won the third quarter by 20 points, won the second by 6, got to rest some guys. It got lower minute totals for Mitchell and Garland and all the guys that are part of the locked-in rotation. That is a big deal. If there's one thing I am worrying about coming out of this game, it is Dean Wade. Dean Wade played, a good 13 or so minutes, 0-2 from the field, a minus 11, single game plus minus and everything, but that's notable in a game where, you won by a lot, didn't score a point. This just feels like, and again, we've talked about Dean, but there's a situation here with Dean where he's just not taking the threes you need him to take. He's not making the threes you need him to take. And I don't know if this is something, whether it's the shoulder thing, whether it is just a kind of a mental hurdle, whatever it is. I think we have to kind of wonder that, but I also think we have to look at what is in front of us. So we're evaluating this. And if you're the coaching staff, you have to look at this too and say, look, this is put up or shut up time. This is win games time. It is not time to experiment with stuff and let guys play through stuff to some degree. I think Dean, you maybe need to let him a little bit, but at a certain point, I wonder if they just look at this and say, okay, we're not getting really what we need from him. Do we try Danny Green? Do we try Jetty Osman and give him some minutes? Do they try Lamar Stevens? Do they go in another direction in part because they're what Dean is doing right now and just that being one of those top 8 just isn't giving them exactly what they needed. This just remains, I think, something we'll be watching all week. I'm sure if he breaks out of it, we can talk about it. I'm sure if this keeps happening, we will talk about it. So we'll keep an eye on this, but this was another game where he's passing up some threes you'd think he should take, and that is a problem. Donovan Mitchell looked fine. I think this is only notable in the sense that he had that possible groin injury or some kind of leg injury, against the Pistons, against the Celtics earlier in the week. Didn't have any ill effects. Keep him under 25 minutes, which is great. Kind of just lessens the workload a little bit for him. Not a monster stat line by any means. You had 20 on 8 of 17 shooting, 2 of 6 from 3, 2 of 3 from the line, 4 assists, and just 1 turnover. So like a good night, but not like a dominant night, right? Like not like the best Mitchell or a top 10 Mitchell game that we've had this season. But he's healthy. That is important, and that's really what you're looking for at this point in time. You just want Mitchell to be around and not have that injury. That was a big scare when he stepped like that against Boston. It looked like he maybe re-aggravated that. Stayed in, was never on the injury report. That in itself is a good sign. You need him healthy the rest of the way. And lastly, good on Lamar Stevens. I thought 22 minutes from him, 4 of 8 from the field. Didn't make a 3, but at least took 5 boards. Plays hard, is competent. Look, he is not, I think, like the perfect Dean Wade alternative, right? Like I think the lack of a 3-point shot, the lack of being a real floor spacer kind of keeps him from being that, keeps him from maybe being the best version of Lamar Stevens that you could see. But Lamar played, he knows what he is, and there's something really strong about that. There is something very important about that if you're a guy like him. That if you can play your role, do all of that stuff, that is a good deal. So good for him, got the chain. Curious to see if that maybe gives him a shot over at some point. If I were to rank, just for the record, have this on for posterity, Jake, you can clip this one off. If I were to rank the Dean Wade alternatives, which is a weird sentence to say, I'd want to see Danny Green first, then Lamar, and then Jetty. But do I feel strongly about any of that? No. All right, we'll come back after the break. We're going to dive into the first 2 stats. The first one is going to come around. We're gonna look at how teams are shooting into the Cavs on corner threes, and then we're gonna talk about Ricky Rubio. That is coming up in segment 2 of this Monday episode of Locked On Cavs. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. Look, first-time users over there can get up to a $100 bonus if you deposit $100. PrizePicks is going to give you $100, and PrizePicks is really easy to play. All you have to do is pick 2 to 5 players. And if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can win up to 10 times your money in any entry. There's no competing against other people. It is just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch, including the NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's and women's college basketball, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, and a whole bunch more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. They offer safe and fast withdrawals. PrizePicks is currently available in over 30 states and Canada. So all I got to do, download that PrizePicks app, go to the App Store, and play some daily fantasy sports. Again, you can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with our promo code LOCKEDON. Again, don't forget to enter that promo code LOCKEDON and sign up to receive an instant deposit match up to $100. All right, second segment, Locked On Cavs podcast. Chris Manning here, solo, no Evan Dammarell today. Thanks again to Jake Stevens, as always, for producing, by the way. Didn't say it at the top, and I should have, because he's the real superstar of the operation. Check out the Marrier on Spotify, or your music platform choice. Okay, stat number 1. Right now, teams are shooting 42.6% on corner threes against the Cavs. Okay, that's bad. That's really high. Only the San Antonio Spurs, who are actively bad, who are tanking for Wemby, or Scoot, or all these guys in this draft class, the Thompson twins, are giving up a higher percentage of threes in the corner. Here are the bottom 5 teams in terms of defending corner threes. This is from Cleaning the Glass. And this goes from 26th to 30th. Charlotte, Brooklyn, Phoenix, Cleveland, San Antonio. You have 2 tankers. You have Brooklyn, who's had the weirdest season in the league. And then you have Phoenix, who has now with Kevin Durant and had kind of a weird season in some ways before that, missed a lot of competent wing play. And then you have the Cavs and you have the Spurs again, who are bad. This as a thing does feel right to me. If we're saying like, oh, is this like a variance thing? Is this an unlucky thing? Whatever. Maybe there is some luck in it. I think with all shooting, there is a little bit of variance and luck that's kind of going to play a part in your ability to defend. But the Cavs are 4% worse than league average there. That is just a fact. That is just something that has happened this year. That is part of the story of this Cavs season to date. And especially of late, to me, it has felt like they are giving up more open corner threes and losing track of shooters on the back end in that way. The Nuggets game was a big deal in that way. I thought the Celtics game had elements of that. A lot of games of late have really had this. And look, the numbers back it up. You go back to February 11th, incidentally, when the Cavs played the Spurs. Since that stretch, the Cavs had not had one opponent shoot worse than 46.2% on corner threes over that stretch. And only once in that stretch was it below 50%. That was that 46.2% number. This is something that has killed them. They had a great February despite this in a lot of ways. So maybe like this is somewhat much ado about nothing. The Pistons, obviously just beat the Pistons easily, and the Pistons were like over 50% on corner threes in that game. So you can't overcome this. And the volume question, it's not like they're giving up a ton of volume on this as well. It's not like they're just like letting shot after shot after shot. But on the margins, and in a series where this could be exploited over a 7-game series and teams look for these shots and it is a really efficient shot, that is a problem. This is something that you have to clean up. I don't know exactly what the fix is. I think some of it is attentive. I'm being more attentive on defense and rotating correctly and all of that stuff. That is part of this. But I think there is something to the idea that, like, look, there's a little bit of unluckiness, but you also have to just track these really good shooters in the back end. Like, I think of the Nuggets game. Yes, I think a lot of the strategy was, let's put 2 on Jokic at the rim. Let's deny him easy layups. Let's make him work for even passes. But when you have Michael Porter Jr. as the shooter you're leaving open and you are rotating back too quickly or too slowly, he's going to kill you. That's what he's going to do. Michael Porter Jr., for all of his defensive warts and the back issues and everything, that guy absolutely will let them fly, and he's going to make a really high clip of them. That is one of the most confident shooters in basketball and one of the best shooters in basketball. And when you leave him open like that, that is a structural defensive problem. You get to the playoffs, that could kill you with, if you play Boston, that's going to be an issue with, if you lose Tatum off the ball, or if it's Brown, or if it's Grant Williams, even if he plays that kind of series. Al Horford just cook them from 3. If he gets hot in 1 or 2 games in a series, that could tilt the series if you aren't careful enough to at least make him work for those shots. Against Milwaukee, if they go Giannis 5 out and it's Connaughton and Grayson Allen and Jay Crowder, like these guys, role players, yes, but guys that you give them clean enough looks and don't cover them correctly, that could kill you. So let's see if this normalizes. I'm curious. This is something I want to ask about this week and kind of pick the coaching staff's brain on a little bit, but it's kind of an interesting one. All right, stat 2. So right now the Cavs are 7.5 points per 100 possessions worse than their normal offense with Ricky Rubio on the floor. This has not been a good version of Ricky Rubio so far. This has not been a version of Ricky Rubio that has been super, super impactful for the Cavs, I think. This is by far the worst mark of his career in terms of his on-off offensive splits. I think it tracks with the tape. The passing is there. The feel for the game is there. But he's not really making shots. It feels like every 3 he takes right now is just not going to go in. And he doesn't feel like he's really trusting himself to drive. He's just kind of hoisting shots when the ball swings his way. That's what it feels like in the moment. He's also 25% at the rim, which is just like a horrendous number. It's by far the worst of his career, obviously. And that's just not like a real player number. That's just like this is really bad. That tells you something about maybe his ability to finish through contact or explosiveness or even just his confidence at this point in that way. That has to get better. There are positives, like with the defensive splits for him are really good. So the Cavs are like 8.6 better per 100, with him on the floor defensively. Like they've been awesome with him on the floor defensively. He's holding up great. He isn't maybe as quick, but like the frame, the know-how, like all of that stuff is really, really holding up. And I think being part of integral defensive units, of stout defensive units. So like he's still like a net positive, like on the floor in that way in terms of the numbers, just based on like how good he's been defensively. But I think like beyond that, like I don't think this is like a version of Rubio that is like actively impacting winning for you at this current moment. And he did last year. He was sensational for them last year. And I think they knew they weren't going to get that exact same thing. They also don't need that exact same thing because they have Donovan Mitchell. They have like Darius Garland, another year older and more mature. Like Evan Mobley's taking on more. Like you have other stuff. You don't need that exact thing. You have Karis LeVert around too for even with all of his warts and things. You have at least other ball handlers. But like this is not like a Rubio that I would feel great about having as like a top 8 of my playoff rotation. And he's going to be. He deserves to be on his reputation. They trust him immensely. The guys in that locker room love him and trust him, without hesitation. The Cavs also are going to need him in the playoffs. Like, the Cavs absolutely are going to need a better version of him, especially offensively. He's going to have to make some shots. He's going to have to attack closeouts. He's going to have to make teams pay. That is going to be a really, really big deal. And the version of Rubio that is happening right now is just not that. And, look, I think even last year his impact was more defensive than offensive. I think that was like very, very clear if you watched and kind of looked at some of the numbers and really dove into that. But like the offense has to be better than this, even if he's not a plus offensive player, and he's never going to be like a plus shooter. Like the Rubio you need on offense, if he's going to be a top 8 guy in your rotation and to give you another ball handler and to give you some two-way play, he has to be better than this. Again, like he's not playing back-to-back, so there's only one more left. We'll see if he plays that, and that's in a little over a week after they go to Charlotte. I think it's the 14th, 15th. They go Charlotte on the road, then Philly at home. It's either 14th, 15th, or 15th, 16th, I think. But you need Rubio to like be more than this, and like if it is a knee thing, if it is a still recovering thing, like that is telling about where he's at right now. Maybe next year he looks better. I think they've always preached caution and patience with him about like how long, like that this was a multi-year commitment. This wasn't just like a 1 year, hey, let's run it back with Ricky and he's going to be the same as he was. That's obviously not the case. Like Ricky is obviously not the same guy he was last year before that ACL tear, and when he was, I think, the 6th man of the year favorite and just playing utterly sensational basketball. That is not this Rubio. That the on-off splits on offense, I think, in particular, tell that story. He's never been that bad in that sense, so let's see if it kind of fixes itself and he gets better. But it is something for me to watch. All right, we're going to come back. I'm going to come back, and we're going to do two more stats. We're going to go Garland on, Mitchell off, the data for those lineups, and then we're going to look at the Cavs' expected wins versus their actual wins and maybe what that tells us about the Cavs as contenders. But first, got to tell you about our friends at Built Bar. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat, then you got to try Built Bar. And guess what? They're also healthy because they don't have all those fat and the calories. When you're getting through the holidays and getting into March and getting into the spring and just trying to be your best self, something like Built Bar can be a huge help. They can help you get through those cravings because they're actually tasty. You wouldn't even think they're good for you, but they are. And well, look, what makes them so good? They're covered in 100% real chocolate. Real chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. I am not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they are healthy. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein in most of their bars. And now you don't need to wait around and get a box. You can go to Walmart or Sam's Club today to get your Built Bars. At Walmart, you can get 4-bar boxes of either cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs, or just all of them. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, go get a 13-bar box with 3 hit flavors, brownie batter, churro. And so check that out. Thanks to Built Bar for sponsoring the pod. Go check them out today and order at Built.com if you're not near a Walmart or Sam's Club at the current moment. All right, last segment, Locked On Cavs podcast. Chris Manning here. No Evan Dammarell today. So right now the Cavs are plus 6.7 per 100 possessions better with Garland on and Mitchell off versus their just kind of aggregate normal stuff. The Cavs right now in that situation are playing great. Just they look great with Garland. That was obviously the case last year when he was absolutely just like an on-off superstar in terms of what the numbers said. They are, for the year, the Cavs are outscoring teams like plus 6 per 100 possessions. With Mitchell on and Garland off, they're plus 4.8 per 100 possessions. So Mitchell is the best guy on the team. I don't think that is really in dispute here. I think that any notion that they're just overly relying on Mitchell or like any of that just isn't correct. I think what is going on with them more than anything else is that this is a team that has 2 really, really good superstar players. That is 2 guys that are absolutely playing at a high level, that are just playing in a way that has been really effective. Like they are good in part because of these 2 guys. These are the guys that drive success on this team. But I think that there is a notion to some degree, and so I understand some of it because Mitchell is the scoring engine, and that is so important, obviously, in a game that is about points. But Garland is in some ways the real offensive engine, the guy kind of pulling the strings, setting everything up, kind of seeing the floor for everyone else. His superpower as a basketball player is the game within the game. It is Mitchell will obviously is great at seeing mismatches and hunting things and setting things up, but it is sometimes like in support of himself and like getting a bucket for himself, which is very valuable and very good. And he's elite at it. He's like a top 12 player in the league this year. He should be all NBA. But Garland is like great at kind of even better than he is at picking his spots for himself and finding opportunities to score for himself, moving the chess pieces around so like he can get like better looks for everyone else and get things set up and know when he can make that sensational pass, right? Like he is the king of that for this Cavs team. So notably, the Cavs are really good with Garland on the floor and Mitchell off. They're a little that has worked. They're positive with both, just one of them on the floor. That is a really good sign for them kind of going forward. But Garland's been great. He's going to have some playoff adjustments to come, I'm sure, once they get into it, but I don't have reasons to think he's not going to be great. All right, last stat. Clean the Glass has a thing where they track a team's expected wins versus their actual wins based on their net rating. Right now, the Cavs are last in the stat at the league at 4.7 fewer wins than you'd expect versus a team with their net rating to have. So that means they've like lost more games than you would expect based on what their net rating says about how good they are, simply. So if you just like, they were normal and like close to like even in this, in 15th, 13th, somewhere in there. This is like a 40-win team that is now at 45 wins right now and like upper in the echelon of the East and more competitive in terms of seeding. They'd be closer to Boston or Milwaukee, than they would the Knicks, right? Who are a game and a half back of them right now in the standings. And we're recording this before the Knicks play the Celtics. That is notable. I think there is some bad luck there, but this to me feels notable. I don't have a great reason as to why this is the way they is. They have the net rating I think is a little juiced by the amount of blowout wins they've had, right? This is a younger group, in its first year together with this new star piece. There's probably some of this being figured out over time and everything kind of working and whatnot. But the teams that are real contenders for the most part are teams that are winning more games than their net rating would suggest. Milwaukee's great. It has been great this year. Denver is up there this year. The Celtics are in the top 10. There are some non-contenders in there as well. But the really good teams just kind of play up and beyond what the numbers say about them. The Cavs have, I think, certainly, again, had some unlucky moments and things that didn't go their way and all of that. That is part of their story, I think, to some degree. Their net rating suggests, and some other numbers and factors suggest that this team is a title contender. I'm not fully there with them, but this is a team that, if you look at their net rating and expected wins, they would have the most expected wins in the league right now based at Clean the Glass. Their win differential in terms of expected wins versus net rating is there with Chicago and Oklahoma City, Memphis, Detroit, New Orleans. They have underperformed in some ways, and whatever the reason is, and you could have theories about it. I have my own theories that I haven't fully cooked yet, so I don't want to really get into them on the show. Maybe that's something we get into at the end of the year. They've underperformed to some degree based on the metrics, and maybe that says that the metrics overinflate them a little bit. Maybe that says that there's some growing up to do. Maybe there's some other thing. But that to me is notable, that in part based on where you'd expect them to be based on their net rating, they're not as good as you'd expect. And that has put them in a spot where they're closer to 4 or closer to 5, than they are 1 in terms of how they're battling for seeding. That is notable. That is interesting. I'm curious to see how that evolves, and I'm curious to see how that looks next year. And for what it is worth, to compare this to last year, the 2021-2022 season, obviously the big Cavs ascension season. I'm pulling this up live because it just occurred to me to look at this year over year. Last year in the win difference thing, the Cavs were bad at this as well. They were 24th last year. Not nearly as drastic. They were minus 1.8, but that is noticeable, I would say. We'll leave it at that. I'm Chris Manning. Evan's back tomorrow. Thanks again to Jake Stevens for producing. Thanks again to Built Bar and PrizePicks for sponsoring the show. Back at you after Cavs Celtics. Be well. Have a great Monday.